Hey, welcome back to the About the Labor podcast here at VikingsTerritory.com. I am BJ Reidell, back here with my guy, Drew Mahowald. And today, we're finally jumping into training camp stuff. It seems like the summer is finally over. Training camp is just around the corner here. And to preview it, Drew and I are going to go through position by position. Today, we're doing quarterbacks and running backs. We're going to also talk about an NFL Spin Zone article that we personally disagree with, very briefly. Finish up with a Take 5 on our favorite baseball players growing up in spirit of the Home Run Derby and the All-Star Game. And then, of course, Drew will give his finals take per standard here, and we'll wrap it up. But first, let's get the advertising out of the way per standard. Brendan Gay, my guy, comedy dude, straight out of Second City in Chicago, is doing a 52 for 52. I think you guys should probably understand what that is by now, since I've explained it like 3 or 4 times. He's doing his first recorded special at the Joke Joint Comedy Club on August 10th. 2 shows, 7:30 and 9 o'clock. No reason that you shouldn't be there. Up-and-coming stud. Get your tickets now at thejokejointcomedyclub.com or BrendanBeingBrendan.com with the promo code Brendan, all caps, BRENDAN. And you'll see me there. Maybe even see Drew there. Who knows? Make sure to get your tickets, and it'll be a lot of fun. So let's hop right into this Vikings football stuff. Power rankings, Drew, set us up with, I guess the summary of what we're discussing here.
Yeah, this was on NFL Spin Zone. Someone brought to my attention on Twitter. A guy by the name of Randy Gurzy. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong. It's a fan-sided NFL site. He power ranked the 32 starting quarterbacks kind of as a pre-training camp deal. And Sam Bradford comes in at number 24, which is egregiously low, in my opinion. Basically, here there's not a whole lot of analysis here. Obviously, if you're ranking 32 guys, I get that you kind of have to be short and brief about this. But his last little take here is that he will fool people with his high completion percentage, but he does that based on screen passes and dump offs. Once Bradford can test defenses down the field, he'll have a believer here. But I guess my response to that would be, looking at the way when he did throw the ball down the field, he was as accurate as anybody in the league.
Yeah. So,
you give the guy time to throw it on the field, and you're probably going to see some results based on the sample size we have. Sure. He was flat out elite throwing down the field this year. Right. There's no other way to look at that. But some other guys that he was not above on this list. I'm just going to look through here, kind of scroll up. Alex Smith, Tyrod Taylor, both guys which are low, by the way. Andy Dalton is number 19. Carson Wentz is number 17, which is, Carson Wentz, is he crack your top 25 right now?
No,
he doesn't crack my top 25.
As someone that probably, in fairness, I feel like I have about as much intel on Carson Wentz as just about anyone at this point, given that I used to go get, I used to watch his mother get his hair done while talking to her about her son. So I'm here to tell you that Carson Wentz is a great dude, but not necessarily a great quarterback. And to put him above Sam Bradford, I almost feel like the reason why he did that was
significantly above him, though. Like he's 7 spots ahead of him.
I feel like the reason why he's above him on this particular list is because the Eagles did trade away Sam Bradford in order to get Carson Wentz. So for that reason, it sounds like on paper that Carson Wentz is the better quarterback, but Wentz didn't prove anything. Right? As soon as he lost Lane Johnson to that suspension and he didn't have both of his bookends working for him, which, by the way, Sam Bradford had no protection. Let's just reiterate that for the 1000th time.
Oh, yeah.
He was your average run-of-the-mill quarterback that had happy feet in the pocket that got, just wasn't the same guy. So to put Wentz above him is very questionable. Personally, when, we just went through our positional rankings for the NFL, and obviously we only did a top 10, but personally I went through and did quarterbacks all the way through to 15, and I had Sam Bradford either at 15 or 16. I don't see a way that he's lower than that. I think there's an argument for him not being a top 15 quarterback just because there are some things that are up in the air. And to be fair to this guy that wrote the article, he did bring up a couple of good points. His completion percentage is, it's
skewed a little bit.
It's skewed for sure. But that doesn't take away from his overall game. You know, he's a very accurate quarterback at every single level. He can make all the throws. That Tyrod Taylor, for example, I think you have to be skeptical of his ability to throw to the intermediate level, especially on the outside. When he starts throwing those flag routes to the corner, those are very difficult passes, and I feel like that's not something that Tyrod Taylor brings to the table. So, as a pocket passer, Sam Bradford is, he's got all the talent, and he's going into his second year. This is really going to be the year when we find out whether Sam Bradford can become that great quarterback or not. And obviously, given the dynamic with Teddy Bridgewater, he needs to come up big this year. So, 24, very low. I would say, worst, at the absolute worst, Sam Bradford should enter the season as a top 20 quarterback in everyone's minds. If he doesn't, that I guess that's up to you. This is this guy's perception. He's entitled to his own opinion. I'm not going to take that away from him, but I just don't think that I think he needs more information. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I mean, and I understand. I mean, I don't know the guy at all. I don't know who he is really, but I'm sure he didn't spend his time preparing for this by watching, every snap of every quarterback. That would be just impossible to do. So I get that, and I did my own rankings, and I certainly didn't watch every snap of every game and every player. So, but I mean, Bradford for me, I think I've had him 14th.
That seems fair.
From what we know about Sam Bradford. The most accurate passer maybe in the league, certainly top 5 in my opinion as far as accuracy goes. He made every throw.
At the very least, on short completions and deep balls, he's extremely accurate.
Yeah.
The intermediate game is really his question mark.
Yeah, that's fair. And then, obviously there are some questions with the crunch time performances. He had a couple games this year where he made some mistakes late. And then the other knock, too, is kind of the pocket maneuverability. Which, he was put in a position to move around, or he needed to move around quite a bit this year. But I think, I guess I can send another question on you here. What do you think he needs to do this season to kind of get that that stamp of approval from not just the fan base, but I guess that respect from around the league? Because there are definitely, I think most people are kind of recognizing that he can make the throws. But there are still some question marks. So what do you think he needs to do? Does it need to be winning a playoff game? Does it need to, or does he need to even do that even?
Here's the thing. I think that, first of all, I don't know if he will ever get the stamp of approval from the Vikings fan base. I think this is something that we've talked about a little bit in the past here. I think a lot of it, it's close to a 50-50 split, but I think there's a lot of Vikings fans who will never get over Teddy Bridgewater, straight up, until he's not in Minnesota anymore.
I 100% agree with this.
So I don't think that he can really do anything to get the approval of Vikings Nation. For the people that don't believe in him, that's just how they're going to be. So for that reason, he's kind of always going to be in a little bit of a hole in Minnesota, and I kind of feel bad for him, to be honest. But at the same time here, I think he already has a stamp of approval around the league. He's already been traded for first-round picks multiple times. There's a lot of people in this league that believe in him. Upper management personnel, guys like Pat Shurmur, for example, who went to bat for him and brought him to Minnesota immediately once the Bridgewater situation went down. I think that he has a lot of a respect around the league, and part of that is his demeanor. I think that not being a flashy persona or not being a guy that, makes the newsreels as, a really great guy like Teddy Bridgewater, for example, kind of hurts him in terms of an overall universal love for Sam Bradford. But I think that around the league, everyone knows that he's a guy that can play quarterback, and he can play quarterback at a fairly high level. He's just kind of scheme dependent. And that's why, getting back to the point that we just made here, I think this is a big year for him because he's finally going to be in a scheme for his second year in a row in a competent offense. And to get back to your original question here, if there is one thing he can do, it's trust his linemen. And that's partially on his linemen as well. They need to be better so that he can trust them. But when he steps up in the pocket, he's not afraid to take a hit. He took a couple of massive shots last year and made good throws in the process. What he needs to do, I think, is that internal clock needs to be reset, right, from last year. He needs to... Yeah. He was trying to get the ball out too fast sometimes, and that's on his linemen, obviously. He just needs to have some better play around him, and he needs to trust that better play, and he needs to understand that, he's going to have more time in the pocket this year, and with that, I would expect, an increase in performance.
I mean, I sure hope he has more time in the pocket, but
can't really get much less, right?
Right. Yeah. Jordan Reed, our friend of the show, recurring guest, I could say. He posed the same question on Twitter to his 25,000 followers now. He said, what does he have to do to win you over? I think is the gist of his question, and I straight up said nothing more than last year. If he does the exact same thing as last season, in my opinion, I think he will have done his job. And I think, for me anyway, what I'm looking at now is the offensive line going to protect him more? Because that's only going to improve his game. And is the running game going to be not clearly the worst in the NFL? Is it going to be more than 3.1 yards per carry?
Is it going to be complementary? That's all it really needs to do.
Right.
It just complement his game. Yeah.
Right. I mean, there's this, kind of this, statistically when you look at it, elite running attacks don't necessarily mean this, elite or efficient passing, but that's not what I'm getting at. I'm getting at literally the worst in the league, combined with
the worst in Vikings history.
There's a difference between having an elite running game and then trying to combine that with efficient passing, and not having the worst rushing attack in the league and combining that with efficient passing. I think if those two things can see a bump this season, I think Sam Bradford's exact performance from last season translated to this season. 4,000 passing yards, 21 touchdowns it was, 5 interceptions or something. I think that will be definitely enough to win double-digit games, get into the playoffs, and maybe win a game. Because we already know what the defense can do. We already know the talent he has at the wide receiver position with Diggs, Thielen. We already know Kyle Rudolph, what he can do. So I don't see much improvement that needs to happen for the Vikings to be a playoff team. But obviously, like I mentioned before, there are those, the crunch time situations and the pocket maneuverability. Those are the two things I look at as weaknesses that he can improve on. And if he gets better at those, then I think we're looking at more than 10 wins.
So basically, what we're looking for from Sam Bradford this season, consistency. So just continue being the same guy, right? Control the clock. Control the game. Because this is a defense-first team. That's not going to change this next season, right? The Vikings need to control the clock, manage the game in order to, keep the score in their favor and, be within striking distance. And then once they are in striking distance down the stretch, he needs to be better. Those are basically the 3 check marks, I think, for Sam Bradford. If he's able to do those 3 things and you can acknowledge his ability to be, a quality passer that could take this team pretty far, given the right circumstances, if all the right pieces fall into place. I guess that's on you then. I think that I think that if all the pieces fall into place, he's got enough natural talent, God-given ability. I think that his intelligence is out the roof. This is one of the smarter quarterbacks in the league. We saw how quickly he was able to pick up a playbook and come in and be efficient. I really don't think that Sam Bradford has to do a whole lot, so I'm with you on that, Drew. Let's hop into the training camp preview stuff now, right? So this segment is kind of it's a little bit of work in progress here. Our plan here is to go through each position like we have done in the past. And we're just basically going to go through and kind of reiterate some of the stuff that you probably already know, discuss some of the quarterback battles, and maybe, get down the depth chart a little bit and discuss guys like, for example, Wes Lunt, who I don't think a whole lot of people are too familiar with. So let's start off with this quarterback position, Drew. Why don't you break down the Vikings training camp depth chart, the invites to camp for me real quick, and we'll hop right into this.
Yeah, first of all, you have Sam Bradford, and then you have, I think, is Teddy Bridgewater going to be? I don't even know what his situation is going to be. If he's actually going to be practicing or not, I doubt it. I don't think he actually can. Right?
He will be there. He
will be there, but he won't be practicing because I don't think you actually can if you're going to be on the pup. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but newly signed Case Keenum, the journeyman backup, he'll be sitting behind Sam Bradford, presumably taking second team reps to start. I guess is what I would assume will happen. Taylor Heineke then will be right behind him to start training camp anyway, and then Wes Lunt. Is he where is he from for college?
I believe it's Northern Illinois. right?
Northern Illinois. I knew it was Illinois something.
So
I don't know a whole lot about him. I think you could probably tell the listeners more than I can, but.
Yeah, so let's start with Wes Lunt then, right? Because everyone's pretty familiar with Sam Bradford, Teddy Bridgewater, Taylor Heineke,
right.
Even Case Keenum. These are guys that we have talked about quite a bit here. So Wes Lunt is from actual Illinois, not Northern Illinois. Excuse me on that. This is a rookie, undrafted free agent, a guy that is in a similar situation to what Taylor Heineke was in 2 years ago, right? Coming into a team that has a starting quarterback, right? Sam Bradford is going to go into camp as the starting quarterback. There's very little doubt that that's going to change. I don't think there's anything Teddy Bridgewater can really do about that given his current health situation. So Wes Lunt is basically fighting for that number 3 quarterback position. He's probably battling it out with both Case Keenum and Taylor Heineke currently, given that, like Drew said, Teddy Bridgewater is probably likely to enter the season on the pup. I don't think that really has changed since we talked about that the first time a couple of years ago. So Wes Lunt is in a position now where he's battling it out for a number 3 spot that may or may not even exist, right? So if the Vikings decide to keep 2 quarterbacks, for example, it might make sense for them to just keep Sam Bradford and, I don't know, Taylor Heineke or Case Keenum, and then decide to add an extra defensive player, keep an extra receiver, whatever it is. Wes Lunt is in a very difficult position, and I wouldn't say that he is the type of guy he's not a guy that I'm expecting to light it up. I'm not really expecting to see his name up in lights. I don't think that there will be much reason to really get behind him, but at the same time, I said pretty similar stuff about Taylor Heineke a couple of years ago, and he came in and did a very good job and obviously made the roster out of camp. So Wes Lunt is a big quarterback that is not technically efficient. I don't think that he's the most fundamental guy in the world. Obviously, he's undrafted for a reason here, but he's got the frame, and he's got kind of the natural physical ability to be an NFL quarterback. I just don't think he has the technique or anything remotely resembles a starting quarterback in the NFL right now. He's not a guy that you can trust to run an offense right now. Let's put it that way. So I don't see him making the roster. I think that he's a good bet to make the team's practice squad as kind of a super backup candidate, a guy that they can pull up if in the event that Bradford, Heineke, Keenum, Bridgewater are all hurt. But I don't see this guy as really being a big difference maker at camp this year.
Yeah, I think he'll be, the 2017 version of Joel Stave.
Sure. Yes, that's great.
He'll play the fourth quarter, and I guess now the way that they're going to do roster cuts this year, he'll play all 4 preseason games probably for sure, and then he'll get the axe, and hopefully the Vikings will be able to retain him on the practice squad. I know last year, I believe, Seattle ended up picking up. Well, or did Stave end up on the
Vikings kept him on the practice squad, and then he was waived in order to make room for, I can't remember who it was to make room for, but he was waived, and then Seattle picked him up.
Seattle picked him up. Okay.
That was after the 53-man cut, though. So I think that was in early September that Stave got moved to Seattle. So, yeah, I think you're making a good comparison here with Joel Stave. I feel like Stave was the type of guy that came in and really a clipboard guy. I don't think anyone wants that description to be attached to him. I think they want to be known as more than that. But Stave came in and he was the type of guy that really knew the offense. People talked about him as like a playbook guy, a guy that really came in and understood everything immediately. He was easy to teach, very coachable, but just he's not ready to be an NFL quarterback. I think Wes Lunt is in a similar situation, so I think that's a good comparison there. From there, let's hop into the meat of this, right? Sam Bradford, like I said, he's the starter. Take it or leave it. You don't have to love it, but that's what we're dealing with here. The real battle at this point, I know that everyone loves the dynamic with Teddy Bridgewater and Sam Bradford, but the real battle right now is for that number 2 spot.
Yep.
Taylor Heineke and Case Keenum. I've made my opinion known on Case Keenum and Taylor Heineke here. So, what we're looking at here is this is a battle between potential and stability, right? The Vikings have to make the decision on whether they want to go with a backup who presents upside potential, but possibly a very low floor in Taylor Heineke, given that there isn't that much film on him, given that he broke his foot kicking down a door last year. Or you go with Case Keenum, who is a career loser, a guy that has really never done much in this league. The Vikings have smoked him in the past. He's going to give you stability, which on a good defensive team is sufficient for a couple of weeks if you're trying to just get by, assuming, let's say, we get a sprained ankle from Sam Bradford or something like that. But he's not going to be a guy that, if he's the type of guy that, in the scenario that happened with Oakland last year when Derek Carr went down, if Case Keenum was his replacement, it would be the same type of situation where you wouldn't expect him to win a big game. You would just hope that he could kind of help you out for a couple of weeks. So I guess my question to you then, Drew, is what would you rather have? Would you rather have the upside potential of Taylor Heinicke? What he has shown in the past is that he might have the potential to be a quality spot starter in the league at some point. Or would you rather have a guy that has basically been a guy that's going to average about 150 yards passing anytime he plays? He needs a stable running game, and he needs a stable defense in order to even come close to winning football games. So, I mean, which one would you rather have? I think there's also a caveat here, keeping in mind that Taylor Heinicke would cost a lot less money to keep on the roster, given that Case Keenum's contract is considerably higher than a rookie deal. I don't know. What do you think?
I'm going to stick with the stability here, but I think you have to think about this in a couple ways here because, for example, if Bradford goes down with an injury that is a 3 or 4 game injury, and you had to trust someone for a short, about a few weeks, I think Keenum is definitely more suited to kind of fill in as
I would agree with you on that.
Kind of a bridge. Yeah, I think. He's 7-7 here in the last 2 years with the Rams, 500 on a bad team. In Houston he was 2-8.
Similar situations in both
10 starts, but kind
of similar situations though, right?
But right,
good defensive teams.
The roster structure is similar. Yeah, you got good defense. You have all kinds of talent on the defensive side on both teams. The offensive side of the ball is questionable for both. But up until last year, the Vikings were led by a really good running attack in Adrian Peterson. The Rams have had Todd Gurley. They're behind Keenum when he's been in the field. So, there's a lot of similarities there. But I think if you're, let's say, by some, tragic, unfortunate stroke of luck, Bradford goes down with some sort of injury again, like Teddy had last season. Then I'd roll the dice with Heinicke here because I think he, like you alluded to, kind of he provides that long-term potential that you'd kind of you'd roll the dice with. And if he can strike lightning in a bottle there, and he can kind of bring that kind of what we saw specifically against Tennessee in his preseason, that's his rookie season and preseason there, he lit it up against Tennessee. If he can bring that to the table, the Vikings could still be a viable team. So I think short term, if you need a replacement, you go Keenum, and I think if you need a whole season replacement, I think you go Heinicke. If you're choosing between those two guys, but in that situation, I guess if I had to pick one now, I'd go Keenum.
Right. So the dynamic that you're setting up right there is kind of a battle between whether or not the Vikings will keep 2 or 3 quarterbacks. Right. If they keep if they keep only 2 quarterbacks, as much as this pains me to say, I think that Case Keenum probably makes more sense to keep as a backup, given that most injuries are short-term injuries. More often than not, you're not going to see as many ACL tears or Achilles injuries or just crap that the Vikings were throwing last year. Most of the time, it's going to be 2 to 4 week type injuries, high ankle sprains, maybe a dislocated finger, something like that. So I think that what the Vikings need to make, the decision they need to make here is whether they're going to keep 3 quarterbacks or 2, and because they can put Teddy Bridgewater on the PUP list, and I think what needs to happen is they need to figure out if they can bring Teddy Bridgewater back at some point, right? If they can bring Bridgewater back at some point, they only need to keep 2. But if they don't think Bridgewater is going to play at all this season, they probably need to keep 3, in which case this battle between Heinicke and Keenum is kind of overblown. So what do you need to see here in training camp from these guys in order to kind of feel confident with the quarterback position moving forward? I think Sam Bradford's pretty much good, right? I don't think I need to see anything from Sam Bradford. I know who he is. I know the quarterback that we're expecting to see come opening night against New Orleans. But I do need to see more from Case Keenum, and I need to obviously see. I need to see Taylor Heinicke reinforce the promise that this show has given him. Right? I need Taylor Heinicke to come in and basically just show us exactly what he did his rookie year one more time, and I feel like at that point he is as good of a backup quarterback as you're going to find in this league if he comes in and shows us exactly what he did 2 years ago.
Yeah, I think, for me, I don't think Keenum has nearly as much to prove as Heinicke at camp.
I would agree.
I think we kind of know. We know what Keenum brings to the table. He's not going to light it up. He's going to make some mistakes, but I think he can be a capable game manager. If he has the right supporting cast around him, and I think that the Vikings, they could win games in the event of an absence from Bradford and Bridgewater. With Heinicke, I think you have, you're basing a lot of, what people think of him just off that one preseason. I think it's almost like, this is your prove it preseason, situation here where you need to be able to show that even after a year's absence, after the whole foot situation, you can still bring that A game, bring it to the table. And if the Vikings do need to trust you in a regular season game where it matters, that you can be the guy. So there's a lot more pressure for me anyway. A lot more pressure on Heinicke because I think Keenum, the Vikings, I think just by bringing him in as a free agent, I think they're kind of in. He's kind of inherently right now the backup, and I think Heinicke has to take that next step for there to be any real controversy. Anyway, at this point,
would you say that it's kind of fair to call Case Keenum like a safety net quarterback at this point? Because the Vikings obviously were comfortable last season moving into the year with Teddy Bridgewater and Taylor Heinicke. At least it seemed that way, right? Prior to the foot injury. So I feel like Case Keenum kind of represents a safety net in the event that Taylor Heinicke comes in and doesn't show anything that he did 2 years ago. Like the potential is just gone. Right? At which point the stability option is the right way to go, right? You want to have a stable quarterback to get you through, a week 6 matchup that Sam Bradford's not able to go in. I think that Taylor Heinicke's skill set translates very well to this playbook, and I think he's kind of a good mirror image of Sam Bradford. That's kind of what you want to do with your quarterback, right? You want your backup to have a very similar skill set to your starter, so that in the event that the starter does go down, it's not like you don't need to shift the scheme in order to kind of in order to still win games. You don't need to change up your offense. Like for example, switching from like when Tim Tebow was in there. Remember when Denver put Tim Tebow in, and obviously they had to shift their entire offense.
They had to change everything.
They had to literally change everything. So that's why Tim Tebow could never really be a backup, because his offense, it was the Tebow offense only. That was the only offense he could run. He couldn't run any other scheme. But with Taylor Heinicke and Case Keenum, I will say this about Keenum, they can both run this Pat Shurmur scheme. They're both capable. They both have the skill set to do it. So the Vikings, for what it's worth, they are going to enter this training camp with better depth. Considerably better depth at the quarterback position.
Oh, yeah.
Knowing that, if one of the quarterbacks decides to, break their foot again, they do have another option this year. So there is that aspect to it. So I don't know. I feel like training camp for the quarterback position isn't all that intriguing beyond the fact that Keenum and Heinicke are kind of battling it out for that backup spot in the event the Vikings decide to keep 2 quarterbacks. I originally thought that the Vikings would only keep 2. I'm starting to lean towards 3 at this point now. I think that 3 kind of makes more sense. So that's what I would expect, which would mean I would expect Sam Bradford, Case Keenum, and Taylor Heinicke to all make the roster, with Bridgewater being on the PUP list and Wes Lunt being the kind of the odd man out that makes the practice squad because he still has that eligibility.
Now, do you think... is Taylor Heinicke still practice squad eligible, or is he not anymore? I don't know how those rules work, but
I want to say no. I want to say no because he was established in the league for at least 6 games his rookie year, so that would mean that he shouldn't be practice squad eligible. I believe. I'm not 100% on that.
Because
but
I wonder if he is still eligible for that. If he starts the year on the practice squad, Keenum is the backup, and Teddy's on the pup, and then the Vikings just kind of go with the we'll cross that bridge when we get to it type of route with Teddy, and if he's able to come back, then they would get rid of either Heineke or Keenum in that event. It's kind of, I guess in that situation, it would probably have to be Keenum getting the axe then, right? Because you're not going to put Keenum on the practice squad, but that's just, obviously, I guess, I don't know how the rules work. But
Case Keenum is certainly not practice squad eligible. I believe that the only guy, so here is the practice squad eligibility, the brief on that. A player cannot participate on the practice squad for more than 3 seasons. He is eligible for a 3rd season only if the team has had at least 53 players on its active-inactive list for the duration of the player's employment, or have no prior accrued seasons in the NFL. So I believe that does mean that Taylor Heineke is eligible, because this will be his 3rd NFL season, and he has not yet spent 1 season on the practice squad. So I believe he is actually eligible. So maybe that's something to keep in mind here, something to look at, to consider here moving forward, that the Vikings would be able to retain both Heineke and Keenum for to optimize their salary cap situation. So that's something to keep in mind, something to look at. But like I said, this quarterback position, Sam Bradford is the guy. That's training camp is about getting ready for the preseason, and preseason is about getting ready for the regular season. And I think that Sam Bradford, as Vikings fans, I hope that everyone enters this year feeling very comfortable with their quarterback situation, given that Sam Bradford at the top, he showed last year that the durability concerns are not nearly as high as maybe we thought they were last year. Given that he took quite a few hits and was able to, get back up and play a full season. I guess he only played 15 games since he missed that week 1 matchup, given that he was still learning the playbook. But I would feel very comfortable with the Vikings quarterback situation this year. Sam Bradford he can do it. He has enough talent to take this team far if the right pieces fall into place.
Put away your Teddy shades. Sam Bradford can play football.
There you go.
Right.
I'm still Team Teddy all the way, but don't get. I'm not going to take away from Sam Bradford and what he did.
You got to give Bradford the credit he deserves.
Please do that. All right, let's hop into the running back position. This is a much more considerably better positional battles at the running back spot. Obviously, you got Dalvin Cook, you got Latavius Murray, you got Jerick McKinnon, you got Bishop Sankey, who is a guy that I'm going to probably talk a little bit about here, because I think that he's a lot more talented than people give him credit for. You got Terrell Newby, who is basically a glorified scat back out of Nebraska. He's a rookie player undrafted. And then you've got CJ Ham, who has made the transition to fullback, but still qualifies in that running back depth chart. So what do you think, Drew? What do you see from this group heading into training camp?
I think, for one, CJ, do we know he's going to make the team, or are the Vikings going to use a roster spot on the fullback? That's one thing I am very curious about, because why would they make him, or why would they have him switch positions if they didn't plan on using him in some form or fashion? But and then obviously I think the 3 guys that are going to make the roster at the running back position are kind of set in stone. I think you don't bring in Murray and Cook and then have Jerick McKinnon the way he performed last year. Obviously the yards per carry mark wasn't fantastic, but what he's done in his first 3 seasons, I think, kind of proves it speaks for itself. So
sure.
I think your 3 guys are there. Bishop Sankey, he was a pretty high draft pick,
second round pick from
second rounder,
Tennessee,
right?
Or to Tennessee.
So I think he's out of Washington, I believe.
Yeah.
But I'm sure we'll see something out of Bishop Sankey, and I'm sure he'll get picked up by some team after preseason, after camp. He'll find his way somewhere. I'm very curious about Newby, though. I don't really know a whole lot about him, but the running back position, I don't think there'll be a whole lot there. I think the one thing we'll be watching is how are they used.
Right.
How are McKinnon, how are Cook, and how are Murray, how are they used? Because I think their roles are going to be what we're kind of looking at, not necessarily the competition and who's fighting for snaps. I think the snaps, in my opinion anyway, I think they're going to be all similar to begin the season. And then if one guy kind of emerges in his role, he'll kind of start to take over more snaps, but that'll be more in the regular season, at least in my opinion.
Yeah, I think that you bring up a good point here that this isn't necessarily like a battle for roster spots, this position. It's more, the positional battles are more to determine, who's going to get the reps, who's going to get the snaps, who's going to get the touches. The initial one that I think that we need to talk about is Dalvin Cook versus Latavius Murray / versus Jerick McKinnon as well here, because of the kind of the situation that Murray has put himself in by being injured this offseason. He hasn't been able to get those reps in OTAs and that kind of stuff. So he's kind of coming in a little bit behind, especially behind guys like Jerick McKinnon who have been here for a couple of years already and already know the scheme. You look at Dalvin Cook, and you have to imagine that he's going to be used immediately, right? He's the Vikings' highest pick. The same type of thing that we did with Laquan Treadwell last year. We expected Treadwell to come in and play immediately because he was a high pick. He's a guy that can contribute immediately. He has immense talent, high potential, blue chip quality prospect. Anytime you have a guy like that, you expect them to get reps immediately. They just need to basically come in and just show that they're capable of doing exactly what they did during their collegiate seasons prior. So I feel like Dalvin Cook inherently is already looking at week one reps. It's just kind of, he's battling it out with Murray.
He's definitely going to be in the game plan week one. I don't think
he has
they're going to bring him along that slowly.
He has to be. The Vikings offense was too weak last season to not implement a guy like Dalvin Cook if you have him, right? There's no it's prolonging the inevitable to some degree as well, right? Dalvin Cook is going to be the featured back at some point here. That's how it's going to be. He's going to get every opportunity to be that guy. Now, whether or not he succeeds, that's up for debate, and that's something that obviously we'll talk about as the season progresses and how well he plays and his performance and what that means for this team moving forward. But with regard to training camp, like Drew said, you should be watching a couple of things. The first thing that I would watch at this position, like Drew said, is to see how they are used. See if Jerick McKinnon is used at all as like a split wide receiver, for example. That would be something that I would like to see. Obviously, during training camp in the preseason, the Vikings aren't going to they're not going to expose what they're doing for the entire season. They're not going to show they're not going to show their hand in August when they need it in October, right? So I wouldn't expect to see a whole lot, but I do think that if you see McKinnon split out wide, for example, just a couple of times, that would be a little bit of foreshadowing to how he might be used in like a new role here. The second thing that we need to talk about a little bit here is that after those three guys, what do the Vikings do, right? CJ Ham, is he going to be on the roster as a fullback? Do the Vikings need a fullback in this offense with a guy like Latavius Murray who can kind of do a lot of the fullback stuff as is?
Or David Morgan even, too.
Yeah,
he's another guy that could be that H-back.
Exactly. I mean, you've seen Shermer use Rhett Ellison as basically a fullback in the past. I think David Morgan possesses the same ability. So I feel like you could very easily only keep three running backs. That would mean getting rid of CJ Ham and Bishop Sankey and obviously Terrell Newby as well, who, like Drew said, is a kind of... I think Newby is entering a difficult spot because he's on a very good running back depth chart. He doesn't have a very well-rounded skill set. Like I said, he's very small. He's kind of a Darren Sproles type. That would be the ceiling for Newby, in my opinion, is being a guy like Darren Sproles. So I feel like it's the most likely scenario here is to see Murray be the featured back week one with Dalvin Cook kind of picking up the slack there and getting some reps as well. And on top of him, obviously Jerick McKinnon being there as the third guy. So that would mean keeping three running backs and no fullback. And you use Murray or, like you said, Morgan in a way that would, a fullback way, I guess. The Vikings not pursuing Zach Line, I think, says something about their interest in, retaining a fullback moving forward here. So I would expect three running backs to come out, and I think it's pretty obvious which three those are going to be.
Right.
It's just a matter of how they will be used, and that's kind of what I'll be watching for at training camp at least.
Yeah, I think what they're going to do probably they're going to try some things in preseason games with CJ Ham at fullback. See how often they can be successful with the I formation or with any other two-back set with him in there. Some goal line stuff, that type of thing, and if they they feel like it could be something they use in the regular season, they'll keep CJ Ham on, and they'll leave off some other position. We'll have one less guy. It's pretty clear what they're kind of how they're going to manage that. I think with the fact that they didn't pursue Zach Line, they don't have a whole lot of interest in the fullback position to me. But yeah, I mean, the running back position, there's not a whole lot to talk about here because I think your three guys are pretty set, and there's not really much of a competition going on. Again, it's just about how are the guys being used? Is Jerick McKinnon going to be a slot guy? And if, by the way, if he is, this is probably for a different show for the wide receiver position. But if he's used as a slot guy, that could mean the end of Jarius Wright as a Viking. But that'll be for another show. But we do have one Twitter question I wanted to get to because it's kind of related to this, but not really because he's no longer on the team, and we don't necessarily like talking about Adrian Peterson, but we will here. Luke, this guy's last name is
Vihild,
Luke,
yeah.
Vihild or something.
Yeah.
He just asked what our predictions were for Adrian Peterson week 1 in the big showdown. So, what do you got?
Yeah, that does go off of the running back spot. So let's get our Adrian Peterson discussion out of the way for the week, as we always do. I expect that Adrian Peterson will not do much, right? I'm not a huge fan of giving exact statistical numbers because I think that it's kind of a fool's errand. You're never going to get it exactly correct. So what I would project for Adrian Peterson is minimal touches because he's playing with Mark Ingram, who's coming off of arguably his best season as a pro, right? And on top of that, they bring in arguably one of the most dynamic rookies in
Alvin
Kamara, the Tennessee product. I don't see a spot on this roster for Adrian Peterson, really. Honestly, if he got cut,
on the roster,
I wouldn't be shocked. I wouldn't be shocked. He's carrying a fairly heavy cap. I mean, if they decide to keep two running backs, why would you keep Adrian Peterson over Kamara or Ingram? So if he does make it to week 1, which I guess we'll see. If he does make it to week 1, I see probably 6 carries for like 14 yards. Something like that for Adrian Peterson. I know. What are your thoughts on this one?
I want him to score a touchdown just for the mayhem that would follow it. I don't think it'll happen. I saw someone actually replied to this tweet, or I don't know how it got in the dimensions of the ATL Twitter, but he said 150 yards rushing and then the game-losing fumble, which would kind of epitomize Peterson's career. But I do. That's the first time I've heard Peterson and not making the Saints roster kind of in the same sentence, and it actually does kind of make some sense. But that would be.
It's a little bold, but
it's not though. It's not that.
It's not outlandish. Let's put it that way. It might be bold, but I don't think I'm too far off base in saying that Peterson could very easily be a cut for the Saints. This is a team that's been in salary cap hell for the last 10 years. Why would they not take the cheaper option, Kamara, and they retain the guy that's been killing it for him for the last couple of years in Ingram?
I mean, unless they're going to cut Ingram. I mean,
they're not going to do that.
But they shouldn't do that because, I don't know.
Who do you really want? Do you want the younger, more talent? Like at this point, obviously Adrian Peterson has the most natural talent out of anyone on this running back depth chart. I don't think either of us will argue that. But both
anybody in the league maybe right now.
Obviously Calvin Johnson not in the league anymore. So in terms of God-given natural ability, Greek god status, Adrian Peterson is still above and beyond most players in this league. But who would you rather have? Would you rather have your guy that has been a schematic fit and been an excellent complement to your passing game in Mark Ingram and Adrian Peterson, or the rookie that costs basically nothing and has arguably the most dynamic skill set with exception to Christian McCaffrey from this most recent class? For me, I'm taking Ingram and Kamara. To simplify this point, I just don't see it as a guarantee. But if Peterson does make it to the opening day roster, which this is something I'm going to monitor now. I'm glad you brought this up, Luke, because I think this is a fair point. I really do. People might think I'm out of my mind by saying Peterson's going to get cut, but nobody else wanted him. The Vikings didn't want him.
It took a long time for a team to sign him.
He's not a lock. I'm saying.
I mean, I don't know who else is on that Saints roster right now for that running back position. I'm trying to think of who else is even there. But if someone does show up big time in camp and in preseason, Peterson's on the hot seat for sure.
I think he's
so.
already
I'm glad I remembered this tweet because he sent it, because I wouldn't want to forget that one, and we've done that before to Luke, I think. So again, guys, too, if we do forget your tweets, your questions, whatever, please yell at us on Twitter and we'll get to it. But anyway, I think
the
it's
other
time
guys, by the way, as Drew just brought up, the other guys on this running back depth chart. They have a lot of guys coming into camp, and another one that could easily take Peterson's spot, Travaris Cadet. By the way,
he's still on. Okay, he's still with them. Okay,
right. That's a name that's a Darren Sproles type.
Yep.
I don't recognize John Robinson Woodgett. That's not a guy that I'm too familiar with personally. But they also have John Kuhn on their roster as well. The guy from Green Bay. So that's funny, by the way. John Kuhn heading the way from Peterson potentially. But I don't know.
That would be fun.
I just don't see him as a lock. So short answer to that question, I don't see him as a lock. But if he is on the roster, I don't see much production coming from Peterson. I would expect 1 fantasy point. All right, so from there, let's hop into this take 5 here. Like I said, we're going to do in spirit of the All-Star Game weekend, our favorite baseball players growing up. Start us off, Drew.
First of all, I'm going to give a couple honorable mentions here, just because, growing up, I was a big Twins fan, and then I got to about 12, 13 years old, and I realized golf was more fun. So that's kind of, from about that age to about now, I'm not totally in on my Twins, but anyway, for now, like Shannon Stewart, Jock Jones, Torrey Hunter, obviously. I even remember, I guess, a little bit of what was his name? Corey Koski in there as well. But
Corey Koski, man.
Number five for me is Pat Neshek, just because of the way he pitched. That sidearm motion.
Submarine.
I remember I had MLB 2K5, the video game, and I always created my pitcher, and I used the submarine style as my pitcher, just because of him. So anyway, and then Jason Kubel, number 4, South Dakota native. I had to throw him in there for my home state. He's actually from the middle of nowhere in South Dakota. That's actually like 5 hours away from here, but it's technically still on the border, so I got to give him some respect there. Number 3 is Doug Minkiewicz for having the hardest name to spell in the world, and B, for having the most pine tar I've ever seen on someone's bat without wearing batting gloves. I wonder how that feels, because
it doesn't feel good.
All over.
It
had to have been all over where he was gripping the bat.
It's really gross. First, if you've ever touched pine tar, there's a reason why they've come up with alternative solutions since, right?
Yeah. Because he never wore batting gloves, ever. No. It was the grittiest thing ever.
He was the most natural baseball player of all time. He's always had the bubble gum too, right? Always chewing.
Yeah. I remember this part too, because I went to there was a Twins game in the Metrodome against the Red Sox, and it was the day. So it was a weekend. I think it was a Sunday game. Saturday night he played for the Twins. And then that overnight he got traded to Boston and played for Boston against the Twins the next day.
When he won the World Series. Yep.
Was it? Oh wow. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, so I was there for that. But anyway, number 2, speaking of the Boston Red Sox, Tim Wakefield. If you can make a living as a starting pitcher in the MLB throwing your fastball at 81 miles an hour, you earn some respect from me. And then obviously the knuckleball. He was kind of the pioneer for that. So
kind of the last true knuckleballer, as I remember. Yeah. There's some guys that throw knuckle curves.
R.A. Dickey now.
Right.
I think he still does it. At least, that might have been like a 2012 name. I don't really follow my baseball too closely. I don't know if he's even in the league anymore. But number 1 for me is Randy Johnson, the most intimidating pitcher maybe ever at 6'10", with the nastiest slider ever. That mustache, that long mullet,
rat mustache, with the mullet. Yeah.
And then
he looked like he was from the 80s or like the 70s.
Yeah. He looks like he's got the perfect redneck look.
And the best nickname of all time, the
Big Unit. Yes. And then, do you remember when he hit that bird? It was like a spring
he was pitching
game
for Seattle. That was in 1996, I want to say, something like
greatest
that.
Greatest moment in sports ever.
Hilarious.
I think someone calculated the odds of that actually happened. A bird flying in at that exact time.
At that angle.
Johnson fastball just drilling him right in the... Oh, man. Anyway, Neshek, Kubel, Minkiewicz, Wakefield, Randy Johnson. All 5 white guys.
All right, so I didn't spend a whole lot of time on this list, and honestly, had I given some more thought to it, I probably would have came up with some better names here. because I do love my old school baseball players. But I'll give a couple of honorable mentions. The one honorable mention that it's just one for me. AJ Pierzynski. I know this is a guy that a lot of people really, really hate, and I totally get that. He sucks. He's a terrible person when he's on the other team. When he's on your team, this is the dude you want. He's always got your back. He's a really nice guy, and for me personally, he was the first guy that ever signed memorabilia for me, and he absolutely made my day. When I was growing, I was probably like 8 or 9 years old, so he made my day.
I'm going to interject here because I'm just going to be a bit quick. When me and my brother were like 5 years old, we went to our first Twins game, and my little brother was sitting under a Metrodome seat, and he stuck his head up, cracked his head open. So we went down to the ER in the Metrodome, and my brother got an AJ Pierzynski signed baseball for going down there. So we also both of us kind of, our first memorabilia ever was both signed by AJ Pierzynski.
I also cracked my head open at a Twins game and got a Rick Reed signed baseball. So
Rick Reed.
So there's that. All right, let's hop into my actual top 5 now. Starting this off, this is one that I'm not very proud of, but Sammy Sosa. 1998 was really the year that I got into sports as a whole, so I was about 7 years old, and obviously that season was as memorable as it gets. I was Sammy Sosa over Mark McGwire. That's why he falls on this list. Number 4 for me, I'm going to put Francisco Liriano because 2007 was one of the most memorable personal seasons that I've ever had. It was the first time that my family got postseason tickets. It was, No, I take that back. It wasn't the first time we got postseason tickets. It was the first time that I was kind of really present and really excited for the postseason. And then obviously Liriano goes down, and that 1-2 punch of him and then my number 3 pick, Johan Santana. That was just absolutely a lethal duo for about 3 months. And I really think had Liriano not gotten hurt, and the Vikings had the Twins entered the postseason with Johan and Liriano up top, I really think the World Series was in reach that year. So I love Francisco Liriano and everything he did for the Minnesota organization. Number 3, like I said, Johan Santana. Same reason. Cy Youngs, plural. I mean, just arguably the best contemporary pitcher in Twins history, right? I mean, over the last 15, 20 years, there's been no one even close to Santana. The day that they traded him for Carlos Gomez was a dark day in my life. Moving up to number 2, Roberto Alomar. This is probably the first strange one on my list. Gold Glove second baseman, 1998, right? Again, going back to that year, he was on the Indians, which obviously you're not supposed to like them if you're a Twins fan, but I could not get over that infield. I loved Jim Thome. I loved Roberto Alomar. I loved Travis Fryman, and the only one I didn't like was Hot Dog Omar Vizquel at short. So Roberto Alomar he was so much fun to watch. He was one of the most naturally talented and gifted vacuums at second base, and I really... I grew up wanting to be a second baseman. Obviously, I kind of outgrew that position and became, more of a corner infielder guy. But that was the guy that I just loved watching growing up. So he comes in at number 2. And then number 1, Torrey Hunter. He's going to go down as my favorite baseball player ever. I loved Torrey Hunter. I loved everything about him. Everything. I loved his Spider-Man stuff in center field, robbing Barry Bonds in the 2002 All-Star game. Robbing everyone. He was literally widely known as the guy that's if you hit it to center, he's going to take it back if you don't get it deep enough. So I loved everything about Torrey Hunter's game. And the one moment that I trace my, not just my baseball fandom, but kind of the moment that really I knew that I loved sports was when Dennis Baez, for a name drop there, drilled Torrey Hunter in the ribs. And I want to say this was in 2003. And the ball it smoked him. And you could tell that Hunter immediately felt, like he might have cracked a rib or something like that. And he just leaned over, and it was like in slow motion in my mind. Like you could kind of see his thought process. Should I do this? Should I not do this? This is a bad idea. And he just picks up the ball and just gunned it back at Dennis Baez. And I was like, right there, that
had to hurt too.
Yeah. I was like, this dude is, he plays the game hard. He's passionate. Yes, he let his emotions get the best of him sometimes, and obviously he was one of the more streaky players in Twins history. But when Torrey Hunter was on, both offensively and defensively, which he was never off defensively, by the way, but when he was on offensively and combined that well-rounded game, he was as good of a player as the Vikings. Again, the Twins have had in a very, very long time. So he's my favorite baseball player of all time, and is certainly of kind of the growing up years for my life. So that's my list. Torrey Hunters comes in at number 1. Number 2, Roberto Alomar. Number 3, Johan Santana. Number 4, Francisco Liriano. Number 5, Sammy Sosa. On to your final take, Drew. This is the segment that we've been doing regularly here.
Yeah, I get to close out the show with this now. But I'm going to give a hat tip to Andy Carlson here, because he kind of started this little thought in my head. He asked people for their hot sports takes that really are unpopular, but that they really believe. And so one thing I thought of here when I responded to this was parity in sports. It's overrated. Why? There's all this talk about parity in sports with the NBA. The fact that the Warriors and Cavs have been in the finals 3 years in a row. But why is there such a need for that? I think sports are more fun when there's 1 or 2 dominant teams or figures or athletes or whatever, and that everybody's doing everything they can to catch these whatever is a team athlete or whatever. Prime Tiger Woods dominated sport. Ratings were way up. Tiger's gone now. Has been for almost 10 years, really.
Golf has not been the same.
Golf has been boring, more or less. Yeah, I mean, if it's not already for some of you, golf has been boring. The 07 Patriots, how great of a story was that? They were just so dominant for the entire season. Nobody touched them.
It was a fun storyline. It was definitely a fun storyline.
Right, and then the Giants come together and beat them in the Super Bowl. That was arguably the most fun, Super Bowl ever. Was it not? And then I see the Warriors now with the Cavs beating them last year, and then this year turning around and getting the best player on the planet. The entire league is doing everything they can to beat the Warriors, or in some cases, wait until the Warriors are done being dominant and then take over like the Sixers are doing. I think everything in sports is more fun when there is less parity. Sometimes I get that some your own team might not be successful in this situation, but I think the overall storylines in sports.
I was going to say that if it's your team that's the really dominant team, how much more fun can it be as a fan, right? If you're a Patriots fan over the last 10 years, how much more fun could you have been having? So I agree with you on this to some degree, and I will say that...
I guess I'm addressing mostly the overall entertainment value of sports.
That's what I was just going to say.
If you're going to turn on if you're going to turn on a game on ESPN or Fox or whatever is on, I think the chances are it's going to be more entertaining if these teams, whether that dominant team or athlete is on. I think they're going for that top spot, and everybody knows what that top spot is.
I agree with you on that. I guess give us your fan takes. Obviously, you could send that to the Vikings Twitter if you want, or you could reach us on our own personal Twitters. Myself, Robert Reidell, ROBERT, REII. Whoa, wow. I can't even spell my last name. REIDELL. Drew Mahowald, MAHOWALD. I got his last name, though. Vikings About the Labor podcast. Vikings ATL pod on Twitter. Make sure to check out my guy Brendan Gay on BrendanBeingBrendan.com or the JokeJointComedyClub.com using the promo code Brendan BRENDAN. And keep an eye out for us this Wednesday. I think we're going to do a live broadcast either on Mixer or some other platform. We're still kind of working out the kinks, but we're hoping to get that out of the way to sort of make sure that we have that all set for during the regular season. So keep an eye out for a live broadcast.
We got big things planned. Big things planned for the regular season. Some live video, maybe some live film breakdown as well.
Exactly.
I think that could be kind of maybe a game changer. Maybe I'm spilling the beans here too much, but those that are listening kind of deserve that. So we'll keep you guys posted there, and also please review on iTunes. We are going to be getting ATL shirts together, hopefully with the famous Mike Zimmer quote on the front for you to sport during the season. So if you send us your reviews on iTunes, 5 stars, you'll be entered for a chance to win one of those shirts. So please do.
And obviously make sure to check out the shirts that Brett Anderson, our graphic designer at Vikings Territory, just put up. The team sleeves and team glove shirts. They're absolute fire. Make sure to check those out on VikingsTerritory.com or Amazon.com as well. And keep following the show. We'll continue next week with continue on Wednesday with probably wide receivers and tight ends for the training camp preview segment. And that about wraps it up. So thanks for listening, folks, and we will catch you later on this week.